The Department of Public Health and Human Services is pleased to bring you Aging Horizons. Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, fraud, legal issues, veterans benefits, and caregiving. Aging Horizons is a program dedicated to inform and prepare Montanans on these timely issues, making a difference to you and your loved ones. Here now is today's program host.
Welcome to Aging Horizons. On today's show, we'll be talking about Montana's Driver Services Bureau. You may think of them as only providing driver's licenses to individuals throughout the state, but they do so much more, including the new Real ID. There's been some changes to that. You probably will need that in the near future, but they also offer a lot of other new services, which we'll be talking about in just a few moments. Stay tuned.
I think the most pleasant surprise when we turned 65 and signed up for Medicare Part B was finding out about our Welcome to Medicare preventive visit.
It was free, and it gave us the opportunity to visit with our doctors and establish a plan for our health going forward.
They reviewed our medical history, measured our height, weight, blood pressure, and counseled us on other risk factors.
To learn more about Medicare's free or low-cost preventive and wellness benefits, call your local SHIP counselor at 800-551-3191. I mentioned it's free, right?
Twice.
This is Bill. He just received his new Medicare card and is following some simple rules to protect himself from fraud. He knows to never give out his Medicare, Social Security, or bank number over the phone. And this is Nancy. She knows that to detect any problems, she always reads her Medicare Summary Notice or Medicare Advantage EOB to make sure the billing is correct. Both Bill and Nancy know that anything suspicious can be reported to Montana SMP at 1-800-551-3191.
Receiving help for Ella has been life-changing, and the best word for it is relief. I was the therapist, I was the aide, and I couldn't be the mom because emotionally you're just to your wits' end. You're trying to survive.
I provide care for the Harrises, specifically their daughter Ella. Respite care is extremely challenging, but the rewards that you receive from it are 100 times more than working with a child that doesn't have special needs. Once they get something, it's everything. It's a you celebrate. You don't just enjoy those moments. You celebrate every moment that you get, that you guided them to that next step.
Respite. It's okay to need it. It's okay to want it. Will you provide it? Call 800-224-6034 or visit respite.mt.gov.
It went from survival to enjoying life and being able to be a mom again.
Brought to you by the Montana Broadcasters and this station.
Welcome to Aging Horizons, which is brought to you by the Department of Public Health and Human Services. I'm your host, Brian Lamore, and we're talking about the Montana Driver Services Bureau today. We know them as issuing driver's licenses throughout the state, but they're also starting to be the contact and the licensing group for providing Real ID, which is a federal program. Joining us today is the Bureau Chief of Driver Services, Rebecca Connors. Welcome to the show. It's great to have you here.
Yes, thank you so much for having me here. This is great.
That's great. We had a great discussion before coming on air here, but let's talk about Real ID. The Real ID is a federal program that the Driver Services Bureau administers for them, and there's been a big need for the Real ID. We've seen a lot of advertising on TV and radio, but what was the initiative, and how is the Real ID meeting the federal government's needs for correctly identifying a person?
Sure. Everybody has Real ID top of mind right now.
Yeah.
And so everybody wants one. And our biggest message is that it's optional. There's other ways that you can be able to travel or enter a federal building without a Real ID. But if you want the convenience of that Real ID, it's great for being able to fly starting in 2023 or entering a military base or a federal building. And so the federal government really wants it hard to be able to create fraudulent documents or credentials. So Real ID is in response to September 11th, where we had terrorists board a plane with fraudulent credentials. And 2005, the Congress passed the Real ID Act, and they really wanted to make it more difficult to recreate that a credential for someone. So it's kind of like a key that your driver's license can get, or an ID can get you anywhere, and it helps you with all different aspects of your life. And so the government is really just trying to make it harder to duplicate that key in somebody else's hands. So there's a couple different things we look at for a Real ID. We want to make sure that you have authorized presence to be in the United States. We want to make sure that your Social Security number verifies with the Social Security Administration. And then we're looking at your residency documents to see that you are a resident of Montana. So Real ID is, again, like I said, optional, and it offers a convenience of being able to get on a plane in 2023 with just your driver's license or an ID card.
So they've extended the deadline to have a Real ID till May 3rd, 2023.
Right.
But there's some convenience here too. You can combine your driver's license with a Real ID, or you can get a separate Real ID at any time, right?
Yeah, so we have identification cards that are non-driver licenses, and you can add a Real ID to that, and you can also add a Real ID to your driver's license. A lot of folks think if you add a Real ID to your driver's license, it's going to change the renewal cycle. It does not. So if you're halfway through the period of time you have your driver's license, we'll just offer a replacement adding on that gold star of the Real ID. So the best time to truly do it is when you're up for renewal. So take a look at that driver's license and see when that expiration date is, and that's a great way to time adding on the Real ID endorsement.
Okay. Well, let's talk about the Montana driver's licenses. There's a lot of information there. I guess if you're coming from out of state, when would you need to get a driver's license, or maybe one of the state ID cards? And maybe explain what the state ID card is and how that's different than a driver's license.
Sure, they're very much the same, that they have that photo of yourself on the credential. It has the issuance date, it has a lot of your personal details on there, like your address, weight, height, color of your eyes, and that just helps provide that verification if you're looking for government services or trying to need any kind of assistance, or whoever's using that ID to verify it's truly who you are. So they're very similar, just the driver's license, whether if you're converting from out of state into Montana, if you have a current valid driver's license in another state, you don't have to test. But if you're getting established as a new driver, or maybe you have been expired in another state, you will have to test, and that starts with the written process and then the driving test. But they're very similar between the two credentials.
I know I got a Montana, well, I got my driver's license recently, and then I also got the Montana ID. And the guy said, well, do you mind if I ask why you got both? And I thought, well, I keep one in my checkbook.
Yep.
You know, it's just more convenient. My wallet might be in the car. So that's pretty convenient to have that second form of ID. It'd be nice to have two driver's licenses, but you can't do that.
Right, yeah, there's a lot of people who are just getting an ID, especially with the Real ID on it, and then they can have that, and then the driver's license can be a separate piece, and it's always great to have it back up as well, too.
Well, let's talk about the driver's license process itself. You know, there are people that are starting to drive, and they're young, and they need to get a driver's license, but we have some laws in Montana that particularly apply to, well, maybe what age you can start doing it. And tell us more about that, what kind of maybe restrictions travel with that.
Sure. So typically when you're a student driver and you're just getting established, if you're around 15 years old, you can start going into what's called driver's education through the Office of Public Instruction. They manage that program with school districts across the state, where the student gets a really robust classroom education, and they get really tons of time behind the wheel practicing as well too. It's a fantastic program. And so when you're 16, you can start with us. However, there has been a ton of backlog due to COVID. So all of 2020, all those driver education classes, some of them had to pause their in-person classes because of COVID, and it kind of created this domino effect of shuffling all the other classes onto the others. So realizing that back up, our Attorney General, Austin Knudsen, he ended up creating a 15-year-old learner's license program. So if you're 15, you can come in and start that driver's license process by taking the written test, and then if you're successful at that written test, holding a learner's license for 6 months. And that allows you to not have to wait for 6 months or 12 months to be able to enter that driver's ed program. So a lot of families who have young ones that need to go all over the place to all their sports activities or to school or to work have really appreciated this program, because it's just opened doors for them and help keeps them on track for the whole process. So we're seeing kids come in and utilize this 15-year-old program, and then also taking driver's ed down the road so they can get that really robust education for driving. So that's been really successful.
And I bet that helps the parents out a lot.
Oh my gosh, they've been thrilled.
Yeah, and Rebecca, unfortunately, we've drawn to a close on this segment, and we'll be right back and talk more about this important topic.
With as many as 1 in 10 Americans at risk for Alzheimer's or some other form of dementia, chances are someone you know and love will receive that diagnosis. When that happens, you may well feel devastated, but know that you are not alone. Help is available. You don't have to face dementia by yourself. Call the free 24/7 Alzheimer's Association helpline, 800-272-3900, for guidance and support.
It's been 27 years. I never thought I'd still be smoking, but here I am, COPD and all. I'm about to have a granddaughter. There's so much to show her, but I'm scared I won't be able to keep up like I used to. I kind of gave up on myself on quitting. But it's different now. I want to be here for her and for my daughter.
When I stopped showing up, Jim showed up at my door. He took me to the hospital in town to get me help. That's the day Jim saved my life.
Everyone has a role to play in preventing suicide. Know the signs and don't be afraid to speak up. If someone you know is in crisis or emotional distress, the only wrong thing to say is nothing at all. Call 800-273-TALK or text MT to 741-741.
Every generation produces heroes, men and women who step forward to defend our country in time of need, no matter the personal cost to themselves. And though we can never fully repay them, we can make sure they have access to low-cost, long-term care when they need it. That's what Montana's Veterans Homes are all about. If you've got a hero in need in your family, call us. We can help.
Hi folks, welcome back to Aging Horizons. I'm your host, Brian Lamore, and we're continuing our discussion about Real ID, a federal program that will need to be enforced, or you'll have to have an ID to access certain federal services starting in May 2023. Rejoining us is Rebecca Connors. You're the Bureau Chief of the Driver Services Bureau. Mm-hmm. And tell us, our viewers saying, I want to get a Real ID. Well, what are some of my first steps? What do I need?
Sure. So it's always good to plan ahead when getting a Real ID. The first thing you want to do is make an appointment with your local driver station. So you can do that at mtrealid.gov. Mm-hmm. That's a great site that has tons of information about what you need to bring with you for that Real ID appointment, as well as scheduling that appointment. So tons of great resources there. Yeah. And we are seeing a lot of demand in our station right now due to people moving in from out of state, and as well as 15-year-olds. And so there's a lot of demand. So it could take up to 6 or 8 weeks to get that appointment. So plan ahead. Then research what documents you need to bring with you for that Real ID appointment. What we're looking for, again, is that authorized presence. So either a birth certificate or a passport. We need to verify your Social Security number, so at least knowing that, so we can check it against the Social Security Administration's database. And then the last piece is we need something with your address on it. And Department of Homeland Security is a little picky about what those could be. So it could be your driver's license with your current name and current address. That will work as one piece. It could be a voter registration card. It could be a utility bill that's mailed to you, or a bank statement. There's a couple different options, but it lists all what's available at that mtrealid.gov. One little thing that can impact people in getting their Real ID is if you've had a name change in your lifetime. So for every divorce or every marriage, you need to bring that divorce decree and that marriage license. And so if you have a current passport with your current legal name that shows what it currently is, and it matches your mail documents and the Social Security Administration, then you're good. You don't have to bring in that divorce decree or the marriage license. But if you're bringing in your birth certificate that shows the name that you were born with, and the Department of Homeland Security is looking at how that name has changed through your lifetime. So if you've burned that divorce decree ages ago, call up that county where you're divorced in or that clerk of court and request a copy. And so for the birth certificate or any kind of name change documents, we're looking for a government issued document. For a birth certificate, lots of folks bring in the certificate with their cute little footprints on there.
Yeah.
That's the hospital ceremonial birth certificate.
Oh.
So again, we're looking for something from the state you were born in to request those. And
okay.
so that's just because the cute little hospital certificate can be duplicated, and where the state one is official and we are looking for a raised seal or some kind of certified copy showing that it's authentic. So those are that's a big thing to look for, as well as any of the, if you're bringing in a marriage license, make sure it's not the one from maybe the church, make sure it's the one from the county court house that shows that marriage that marriage happened. So.
Yeah, and a lot of this takes time. You mentioned that it might take up to 8 weeks to get an appointment. If you need to get a certified birth certificate, you can get that through government agencies, but that again takes time and a little bit of money to get back to you. Now, you mentioned that if you're coming from another state and you have a driver's license and a real ID, do you have to provide more information when you change over to a Montana driver's license, and does the Real ID certification carry over with it?
That's a great question. So no, if you're transferring from one state to Montana, you have to start that process all over again. The only thing we can do is verify that you are coming from this other state, that you've held a valid credential there, but we can't see what documents that state has seen, so we need to start that process all over again. So if you're getting a Real ID, you need to bring all those same documents that I outlined. And they're very similar to if you're just transferring in and getting a regular license, a non-Real ID credential, where you're still looking for the authorized presence, birth certificate or passport, social security number, and then just one piece of mail for a non-Real ID. So.
Oh, okay. That's interesting.
Yeah.
But now you're part of the Bureau of Services. You also keep the history of an individual's driving record, right? Tell us more about that.
Sure. So everybody knows us from that in-person visit at the driver's license station. However, there's a whole nother side to what we do, and that's record and driver control. So we maintain all of your driving history and driving records that might be useful for getting employment. They might need to see your driver history, especially if you're doing something with a commercial vehicle. We also maintain any kind of sanctions or revocations issued by a court. So, or any of your traffic fines as well for speeding that state or local law enforcement might have given you. So we maintain all those records that go onto your license.
And do you carry them over from other states, or you do an inquiry somehow?
We sure do. We carry those from other states, or if we have an out-of-state driver coming through Montana and they get a speeding ticket, we let that state know that they got an infraction here as well too.
So if they get points in their state. Do we get points in Montana?
We do. We sure do get points in Montana, and it varies for what the infraction is.
Okay, so you're the record keepers. That's got to be interesting. But the professional licenses like CDLs, certified commercial driver's license, there's a lot of levels there. And you must administer the testing for that also. Yeah,
we maintain all the different classes of driver's licenses. It goes from Class A through Class D, and they have different requirements. So you might have a Class A that also might be a school bus driver or a commercial vehicle. So there's a couple different things that apply. But yes, there's for commercial licensing, that's all handled through, again, the federal government. And so testing is very rigorous, from the written to the skills testing, and we manage all of that process as well. Okay, well, that's interesting. Well, we're drawing quickly to a close on our second segment here. We've got a lot more interesting information, stuff that I never knew about, so stay tuned.
I was diagnosed with diabetes in 1992, and I went into denial. It made me angry. I was a professional chef, and I didn't want to change my eating style. It took me a long time to get serious about managing my health. My perspective changed from resentment to one of loving my body, the container for my spirit. Getting help from my diabetes educator supported my goals of improved self-care. I want to feel good and have a great life. My diabetes educator helps me do this.
If the Aging Network in Montana was a restaurant, the sign out front would say, over 50 million meals served over the last 30 years. Since adequate nutrition is critical to health and quality of life, nutrition services are an important factor in keeping older Montanans healthy, independent, and living in their community and home. To find out more about senior nutrition programs in your area, call 1-800-551-3191.
Is that Robert Knievel? Captain Lewis, Captain Clark, I'm officially Evel Knievel now. I'm getting my Montana Real ID.
Did you make an appointment at mtrealid.gov?
Yes, sir.
Smile.
About my non-laminated Social Security card, 2 documents proving my current residential address, and my certified birth certificate.
Approved.
Go to mtrealid.gov.
Now I can fly. It's that easy.
I think the most pleasant surprise when we turned 65 and signed up for Medicare Part B was finding out about our Welcome to Medicare preventive visit.
It was free, and it gave us the opportunity to visit with our doctors and establish a plan for our health going forward.
They reviewed our medical history, measured our height, weight, blood pressure, and counseled us on other risk factors.
To learn more about Medicare's free or low-cost preventive and wellness benefits, call your local SHIP counselor at 800-551-3191. I mentioned it's free, right?
Twice.
Welcome back to Aging Horizons. I'm your host, Brian Lamore. And our show today, we've been talking about the Driver's Services Bureau and what kind of services they provide. And just recently, the Montana legislature concluded. And Rebecca, there's some new laws applying to our driver's licenses. What are they?
Yeah, the biggest one with the most impact is we now have a 12-year license. And typically before we had an 8-year license, but with all of the demand that's been placed on our stations for needing to get in and service, we thought one way to be able to tackle that demand is to have one less visit in your lifetime in our office. So we've extended it by 4 years, and the 4-year license is just good for a non-Real ID credential. So if you want a Real ID, the cap is at 8 years. That's what the feds require. But you can always get an ID, as you mentioned, like you have just an ID credential, and that can just be with the Real ID, and then you can have the 12-year driver's license. So that's an option for our folks as well, too.
That's good.
So,
yeah, and then at the end of 12 years, do you have to go back in the office and get another update? I think you said you might be able to do a mail-in, huh?
Yeah, another one is that we expanded our mail-in services. So prior to this legislative session and prior to COVID, we had a mail-in and online option. However, you had to bring in a form from your eye doctor. You had to bring in a form from your medical doctor saying that you were cleared to be able to drive. Not many people use this. Only about 1,700 people over 3.5 years use that service. So when we opened it because of COVID and expanded our online and mail-in services, we had over 30,000 people utilize it. So we saw the demand and we said, let's open that up to just apply for a regular renewal, and you can do mail or online and get that 12-year license or renew your Real ID. If you have to add on the Real ID, you still have to come in person to start that process. But if you just need to renew, you can do that through the mail and online. Currently the mail is open, and we should have an online portal open here in early July. And so we're really looking forward to that. That'll be a great service.
That's great. And the 12-year license is available now. And but you know, it kind of makes me wonder, you got 12 years and then you have another 12 years. Over 24 years, my eyesight has changed a number of times. And of course, you always remember going in and looking at that thing and checking your eyes and hoping they're all right. Have you caught many people with eye issues at the driver's license?
Yeah, when you're doing that in-person visit, we have a little eye test that folks participate in to be able to issue that credential. So that's why for the ages of 21 through 63 for that 12-year license renewal, that's why we want to alternate the online and the in-person visit. So you can't do 2 online or mail-in applications back to back for 2 cycles. We still need you to come in. We want to make sure that you meet all of the conditions to be able to drive, and it's a great check-in. So for the 12-year license, you can get a 12-year license up to 63, but then if you have a renewal between that ages of 63 and 74, we will want you to come back in at age 75 so we can do another check to just make sure everything's good. And then from 75 on, you'll get a 4-year license.
A 4-year license, which is pretty smart. Because I know, well, as I'm getting older, it's like, yeah, my eyes have been changing quite a bit. So that's great. So let's go over the Real ID requirements also. What are they? What would a person need to bring in to the driver's license station? Because that is so important, and where can they get that information?
Sure. So what you're looking for is the authorized presence, that birth certificate or a passport. Passport's a great thing to bring in if you have that. The birth certificate, again, you want to get that through if you're born in Montana, it's really easy. You can get that birth certificate, a copy of it at your local clerk and recorder's office for $8. They also, DPHHS has an online vital statistics website where you can order one online, and it's about $40. So there's ways to obtain that, and then you also need to know your social security number for us to verify it, as well as then 2 pieces of mail. So the biggest lift is to be able to get that birth certificate or passport, because usually folks have moved, they misplaced things. So making sure you have all those documents ready.
Probably heard it all.
Yes, yes.
Well, another thing that you do with the driving history is you monitor high risk. What is the high risk category?
Sure, we manage a high-risk insurance. So if you've had, if you're maybe a new driver, or if you have had multiple traffic offenses, you're what we call a habitual traffic offender. Your insurance, you will be required to carry a high-risk insurance policy, and those are all filed with our office, and we maintain a record of that on your driving record.
So you keep track of them, you monitor them, and I imagine there's a point you might say, too many points, you don't get a driver's license?
Yeah, there, for sure. There is a point system, and if you max out your points, then you're on probation for a year and eligible to be able to receive a driving credential.
Oh, and there's no work requirements or allowances or anything like that?
Depending on what the court sometimes allows. So sometimes you can get a probationary license, and they allow just for essential travel. However, if you keep maxing out all those points and you continue these habitual offenses, sometimes your license can be revoked for up to a year.
Stay in that high-risk category.
Yeah.
You don't want that.
Yeah.
That sounds terrible. Well, Rebecca, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's fascinating information. I learned a lot.
Oh, fantastic.
I enjoy that, and thanks for representing Montana and for your service to the state.
Great, thanks so much.
You're welcome. Again, for our viewers, we've been talking about the Montana Driver Services Bureau, and there's a lot of fascinating information there. One aspect of it, besides their driver's licenses, is that you can get your Real ID there. They're the only certified area that you can get this federal document, the Real ID, issued to you, so you can access aircraft and federal facilities. If you go to their website, you'll find out the requirements that you need to bring in to document who you are so that we can know you're safe. Thank you for joining us.
Special thanks to the Department of Public Health and Human Services for their continued support. Hosts on Aging Horizons are program specialists at the Montana Office on Aging. Production facilities provided by Video Express Productions. For more information about Aging Horizons, call the Department of Public Health and Human Services toll-free at 800-332-2272.